Good morning and welcome to today's Snaptech IT webinar, which is entitled CMMC 2.0 Level 1. My name is Ted Hulsey and I'm your host for today's event. First, let's go through a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode, and today's session is being recorded and will be circulated to all registrants. Thank you for joining in for the live session. We will have a special Q&A section at the end of today's presentation. Now let me introduce our featured speaker. Karl Bickmore is co-founder and CEO of Snaptech IT. Karl, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Ted. I appreciate you spending a little time with us here on the webinar, and it's as always great to see you. And I'm really excited to be getting out some good content around the things that have changed here. I see a lot of questions circling around about CMMC 2.0 and what it means, and I'm excited to talk about the concept of self-assessment because it appears that that's going to be a lot more in use than was initially thought, and that's, like, in my mind, one of the biggest changes. And so I think people really need to understand what that means.
Okay, well, we'll be getting into the conversation around self-assessments in a moment, but just for the audience's benefit, why don't you tell us just a little bit about what Snaptech IT does?
Well, you bet. Look, at the most basic level, we're just some folks that are doing some outsource IT. Sometimes we're called a managed service provider or an MSP, or a managed security service provider, MSSP. We have offices in 3 locations across the United States, kind of covering clients all over the US. And I think that what's really unique and different about us is that we're very process driven, and we're very focused on the cyber defense area of helping folks with their cyber resilience and really using frameworks and standards. And so because of this, we've found a lot of customers come to us for not only cybersecurity needs, but also compliance needs like the CMMC and others similar to it. So, look, we do everything for professional services. We offer help desk services. We do cloud solutions for folks. We do migrations. And a lot of folks like to ask us to do assessments for them or to help them with their self-assessments. And a lot of folks ask us to do ongoing management IT tasks for them.
Okay, well, great. Well, let's talk about compliance. I think everybody who's in the defense industrial base is kind of breathing a sigh of relief because just a few weeks back, what's been now called CMMC 2.0 was just announced, and it's a pretty big overhaul of the compliance framework. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happened with 2.0 and this concept of a self-assessment? What is it and what is it not? So clarify it for us.
Well, so in the CMMC world for quite a while, and as the standard was originally written, whether you were going for a level 1 or a level 2 or all the way up to level 5 as they were previously set up, everybody was going to be assessed by one of the certified third-party assessment organizations, or C3 PAOs. And that has changed considerably. In fact, there's a couple of other changes just in general that I really agree with. And so it's really funny. Like, one of the big changes is they collapsed it from 5 levels of implementation to 3. And they really, all they did was they took out what was level 2 and level 4. Both levels that I had difficulty explaining to a customer why they would ever do just to that level. Like, why would you do level 2? Because level 3 it makes so much more sense in what you're going to need to do. And so to me, the simplification there makes a lot of sense. The other good news about all this is that this is not going to be as burdensome as it was originally. I mean, if for nothing else, the fact that you now can self-assess and do third-party assessments less often, those assessments will likely, carry a cost burden with them. They're not going to be, free. And so there are going to be organizations that they can do a great job with their self-assessment and get good professional help. It's not going to be as expensive, and they'll be able to, do a better job focusing their money on what they really need to do to make their IT and their systems work better for them. And so to me, that's a win-win. I think the key thing is I think the days of 2016, when your prime subcontractor sends you a security questionnaire and you just kind of answer it, not really knowing what the questions mean, I think those days are going to still be gone. I think that, and that's really what the whole CMMC thing is all about, is a lot of folks were in the defense industrial base not properly answering assessments, maybe even sometimes misrepresenting because there just wasn't necessarily any consequences around it. It's not that time that you can just go back to that standard. There is going to be more effort put towards the False Claims Act. There's going to be more things going on. And look, DFARS and NIST 800-171 is still the law of the land. But the reality of it is that they've simplified the standard, and that means that there's going to be a little less burden than before, and there's going to be still a focus around improving the cybersecurity supply chain for the federal government and its agencies. And so it's both still secure and still strong. It's still the law of the land, but they've made it a little bit easier, in my opinion.
Okay, and really cybersecurity, it's not just an IT challenge, but it's a business challenge. And what should people keep in mind? I mean, what should be like the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, so to speak, as companies are thinking through this new compliance framework and really the importance of improving their cybersecurity?
Well, any business, regardless of whether they're in the defense industrial base or not, would benefit from some of the practices that are being asked to be done. It's just good sense. It's good IT. And the reality of it is there's a lot of businesses of any kind that are behind, and they're not operating with the level of risk that they should be comfortable with, or that they are comfortable with. If many of them don't even know how risky it is. And look, here's the thing: companies are getting attacked on a regular basis, and we probably all know somebody, or even our own business has had some kind of attack, and it's only getting worse. And so really, this is coming at a time when this is aligning a compliance request with just good business sense. But when it comes to the CMMC standard and providing guidance and compliance, look, some of the standards are just around physical access to the building. Some of them are around your hiring practices to make sure you're doing background checks and that you're doing citizenship checks and the various things that you need to do. Look, the main focus of CMMC is to protect federal contract information and controlled unclassified information, things like drawings, designs. It could be in emails, email attachments. It could be files in your system. Those kind of things need to be protected. That's the primary cause of CMMC. But the standard reaches out to really ask you to do good things that will reduce the risk of your business of having a really big problem with a hack or a cybersecurity problem. And so, look, it's like a lot of times when I talk to machine shop owners, I relate it to any control system that they use, because many of them have control systems that they're already using in place where they have checks and processes and systems. It's just about now saying, handle your IT in the same way, and you'll have a much better situation. You'll be compliant, and you'll reduce the risk in your business significantly. And so it is about a business owner wanting to look at their business from the standpoint of what's my opportunity and what's my risk. The opportunity is the further you get ahead on the CMMC things, the more contracts you can participate, excuse me, the more favorably you'll be seen by your prime subcontractor, aka your customer. That's the opportunity. The risk is that if you do these practices, not just IT alone challenges, but just in general, these good business practices that are being recommended, that you're going to be reducing the risk in your business. So you're going to be protecting your business better. And those are really the key elements. It's just, you want to have these gauges. You want to know as a business owner how you can truly tell if you're doing a good job in cybersecurity. And if you don't, you're going to be, flying at a risk level that you may not be comfortable with, or you may not even understand. And so get the measurement and understand it so that you can get that information and really make good, sound business decisions, regardless of whether you're trying to be compliant or not.
Yeah, so there's no question it's good business to be compliant, right? A company's going to be well positioned to serve the contractors and their clients in the bidding process and that sort of thing. And so whether somebody's doing a self-assessment or they've brought in a third party to help them kind of study where they are, what are some of the biggest changes that you guys discover and improvements that organizations need to make as they're kind of hey, let's figure out if we're level 1 or we're considering level 3. What are some of those concrete cybersecurity improvements that often need to be made?
Well, there's kind of a list that are pretty universal that we see everywhere. Most folks in the defense industrial base have already figured out how to do the hiring practices that they need to in the background checks, and have figured out how to do the perimeter security and the physical security, the logging, the escorting through facilities, those kind of things. And if you haven't got some of those fundamentals in place, that's some pretty bare minimum stuff. But when it comes to the cybersecurity side, I think there's like some really common elements that we see are regularly missed. Like look, they'll have things like remote access without multi-factor authentication, or their email will be set up in a without any of the security features. It's just kind of default Office 365 or default G Suite without any of the stuff turned on that really helps prevent email fraud, which 92% of successful attacks begin with email compromise. It's just astounding how much better people need to do. There's things around their firewall practice. There are things around their backups not working. And ultimately, when it really comes down to it, Ted, is a lot of small business owners in particular just don't have a grasp on their IT. It's not been a priority for them. It hasn't been as important for them to do their production. But the reality is, in these days, that IT problem can now affect your ability to do production or affect your ability to retain customers. The reputation hits alone are an issue. And so to me, I think that it's an education and awareness problem for business owners and managers to understand actually how to properly manage IT, which in my opinion begins with a good assessment where you can really truly understand where you actually are. There's a lot of things that we commonly see not in practice that need to be done, like I listed some of them. But more than anything, I don't see business owners having a good practice of truly knowing where their position is and what their risk is. They're not assessing well.
Right. And so this brings us to, CMMC 2.0 now offers a couple different options for completing a self-assessment for level 1. What are those options, and what's involved in doing the self-assessment?
Well, yeah, sir. I mean, the options are, look, you can turn to an internal person. Maybe you have somebody in your organization that's in charge of security and compliance or your control systems, and ask them to go through the process. A lot of times those folks are not specifically IT trained or IT experts. And so a lot of folks will also hire some type of company like an RPO, registered provider organization that's been trained and accredited by the CMMC AB accreditation board, that will come in and actually help make sure that they're doing their assessment, asking the right questions, and doing the right evidence collection for their IT systems. In my experience, there's a big misnomer out there that a lot of business owners, when they think of IT, don't really make the distinction or understand that there are folks that know how to set up desktop computers for people, but they may not have any idea how to do a good job setting up a firewall or a server or a cloud-based system or an ERP software. And so there's just a lot of variety. And so a lot of times they'll turn to their IT person and say, do an assessment in-house for us, when actually, frankly, they don't know how to do it. And the work that they turn in could become problematic. It could be that you're making false claims, and that can be an issue in the future. So, organizations can do it in-house. If you got the skill set and the people that know how to do it and they've been trained in the thing, you can now do the assessments in-house and submit them once a year. And that's your path for a couple of the levels of CMMC. The other option is to have an organization and come and help you with your self-assessment. Ultimately, as a company, you're responsible for your security, you're responsible for your assessment, but an organization can do the legwork, provide you the evidence, explain things to you, and then you can make the evaluation and sign off on it and submit it. And so, even though it's a self-assessment, you can have outside help in that self-assessment. And for my business, I hire outside assessors to come and assess my business every year, because I don't want the wolves watching the hen house, or whatever the term is. I want a truly objective third party and on my assessments, so I know that I have a good answer that can really hold my people accountable if I need to.
Yeah, I mean, at one level, it's just pure accountability. Checks and balances mean you have to have different folks kind of auditing the work that's been done. And on the other hand, it's just, I think, even at level 1, there's 17 different criteria, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
it's extensive. It's an extensive amount of information and readiness that you need to have, and so it's not trivial. I mean, I think, like you mentioned, there's layers upon layers of complexity in terms of properly securing an organization. And do you have that in-house, or could you rely on the expertise of a third party to help you validate where you are and then give you the right advice on what you may need to improve so that you're making correct attestations in your, your bids and in your self-assessment?
I mean, to me, the great news about, say, for instance, level one, and level one is not very much changed from the version 1.0 of CMMC. In CMMC 2.0, level one still is pretty similar to what it was before. And the good news about level one is, regardless of whether you're doing CMMC or whether you're in the defensive industrial base or not, I agree with all those controls. And that's the kind of stuff that we would help any company in any industry do to protect themselves. They're basic and foundational things that need to be done. And level one is recommended for any business at any level in any area. Those practices are fundamental, is the way to say it.
Very much
A lot of our
stakes.
customers are going to probably be needing to look at level two, which used to be known as level three in the previous version of CMMC.
Okay, and so let's talk about that. So, contractors handling CUI and requiring level 2 certification, how do they need to think about self-assessments or bringing in a third party to help them?
Well, so for the level 2 assessment, it's not just the 17 controls and practice areas that you find in level 1, but it's the full list of the NIST 800-171 controls, which is 110 controls. And there's some source things that form those controls out of the federal information, I think, processing standard, FIPS, as it called, FIPS 200, and some DFARS things that inform that. Those are laws of the land, and they formed this 800-171 set of controls. And I personally find it helpful that now the CMMC is fully aligned with that set of controls. They were a big part of it before, but there was other additional things that I think were practices that were asking either for too much, were too onerous, or didn't apply well. There's nothing wrong with those additional practices, but I think this really aligns everything into an easily understood process you can do. But why would you want to use a registered provider organization? Well, hey, look, Snaptech's an RPO. Use it. No, I was kidding. The point is that do you have an organization that actually knows the controls, has been vetted, has the background checks that the accreditation body does, and do you really have the ability to properly assess all 110 controls in-house? And so it's very unlikely that a lot of organizations will be able to pull this off with their in-house team. And so then you can go out to the industry and get somebody who is trained and vetted in these controls and in these assessments, or you can, not. Either you have a registered provider organization or not, but if you're working with an RPO, you have a certain degree of assurance that they know what they're talking about when it comes to the subject matter, and you're not going to get into trouble later with unexpected surprises about gaps in the assessment or things that weren't understood.
Yeah, and a big part of this is you do the assessment and you discover the gaps, and then there's work to be done, and then that's a huge part of this. Is that this assessment is usually kind of step one to understanding where you are, and there's usually work to be done, no matter whether we're considering level 1 or level 2.
Well, it's a cycle. You first need to identify, then you need to create your plans, and then you need to manage those plans, and then you circle right back up to another look at it and you do it. In fact, by the time you're getting to the level 2 certification, you need to be full of good policies that talk about the 110 controls you need to have in place. And then you need to have created standards around those and processes, SOPs. And then you need to have those controls put in place by your IT team to address them, or by your hiring team, or by your security team for physical building security. You need to have actual defined controls in place, and then you need ongoing auditing of them. Even though you get an assessment and understand where your gaps are, and you put a project in place to do remediation, a plan of action, you still need to have regular looks at that, and so not only do you need to put the controls in place to say, make sure that nobody's logging in remotely without multi-factor authentication on an encryption, but you also need to audit that those controls are set up correctly on a regular basis, because you turn it all on and then 3 days later you have 2 new people hire, and did you really get the SOP in place, and do they really get set up with remote access correctly? If you don't have this ongoing management mentality, you're not going to be hitting level 2 correctly. It's not only the policy, the plans, procedures, and the controls, but also the ongoing management monitoring and auditing of those controls in a very defensible way. Like, those are the things that the auditors are going to want to see, that you've taken to the level that you're validating and verifying it on a regular basis is still correct and is in place and functioning.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, let's tons of great information there. Let's go to the Q&A log and grab a couple questions that have come in. So just a practical one, it looks like here. So what are the steps of self-assessment? How long do they take, and what do they cost?
Oh yeah, well, that's probably like the money question. Probably everybody would come just to hear this one, because that's the number one thing I hear talking to folks is ultimately, like, what is this really going to take to do? The assessment is the beginning of the journey, and it is. It's not as though it's cheap, but it might be considered an entry-level part of this process, depending on things you need to do. It's not as expensive as other things could be and will be likely to fix. But the reality of it is, first you need to decide your strategy. How much are you going to do in-house? Are you going to involve an RPO in the process to make sure that you have a good complete assessment, or just a third party in general? Make sure that you understand that the deliverables of that assessment, and the duration. It really depends on the size and complexity of your organization. There's scans that need to be done on your IT systems. There's policies that need to be reviewed. There's evidence that needs to be collected, and then documentation built out of it. In our organization, for a company that has 1 or 2 locations and maybe between 50 and 200 employees, those assessments are going to be around 40 billable hours. And a large organization, you can kind of extrapolate, and smaller, you probably get away with a little bit less than that as well. And the billing rates, for us are at 190 an hour for cybersecurity assessments. You're going to see kind of a variety out there that's kind of in the middle of the road in our experience, what we've seen out there. And so you can kind of extrapolate that you're looking at about this $7,000–8,000 range to get the assessment done with a third party's assistant. A lot of times we ask folks to get involved in a GRC or a governance regulation and compliance tool that helps you document your findings and document your assessment and auditing activities. And so there can be some additional costs of a tool you might want to buy to help in the process. But the reality of it is you probably can get your initial assessment done for under 10 grand, and unless you're a very large, complex organization. And then from there, you're going to be able to get a plan that will tell you what the ongoing plan is, a roadmap per se, with some kind of high-level costs. I know that we always like to include, a 2 or 3 year IT roadmap that can plan out what it is and kind of give costs and budgets in mind to help an owner, figure out which of the things they want to go after. The reality of it is you're expected to meet these controls, and so at some point in time, you really need to do it. There's some that are just no-brainer, you should do them anyway. So if you find you're not doing, put them on the list. And then there's some finishing controls or details that maybe you'll put later in the roadmap. But in the long run, you need to get all these done. And that's about what the cost is, something in that 8 to 10 grand range for a common smaller business. And then you kind of go from there with your plan.
Okay. All right, well, that's a good framework to think about the level of investment. And that's, you're kind of going to have that cost, whether you're doing it internally. It's not a cash cost, but it's a personnel cost, or you're outsourcing it and bringing in outside experts. I mean, right? So it's going to be dozens and dozens of hours, no matter what.
Yeah, sometimes people think, hey, if I outsource it, it costs me more. That's always an interesting question, because what are the people doing internally that are not doing it? And will they be even as fast or efficient as people that are doing it regularly?
Right. So another question. So will CMMC certifications apply to classified systems and classified environments?
Well, so that's not the current thinking specifically. This is more about the defense industrial base for controlled unclassified information. There's kind of a whole different system that controls actual classified things. And so the Department of Defense does those assessments themselves, and they operate at an even much higher standard and a lot more controls than we're talking about in CMMC. And so, yeah, it's really only in the unclassified network section, which is really where a lot of the folks we're talking to are. The vast majority of the defense industrial base involves subcontractors to prime contractors. And those are the folks that run everyday businesses like, our business. And those are the folks that are needing to raise the level, but they fundamentally are typically not working with classified information. It's controlled unclassified information.
Okay. Great. And then maybe just kind of a final question here. So how can folks who have joined today's webinar take a next step? How can they figure out, how prepared they are for a level 1 certification?
Well, I think there's a lot of great resources, and my opinion, like the biggest thing that holds a lot of folks back is the educational piece, where they just simply don't know how it applies to their business, or they don't know where to start. And there's some great resources out there on the web, like the CMMC AB website itself. The accreditation body puts out some really great resources and some information on the standards. Some folks find that to be a little bit too much compliance speak or IT speak. It's hard to say. I can tell you here at Snaptech IT, we've really made an effort to try to break it down in plain English and help folks understand what it really means to them on a day-to-day basis. And so we've certainly made an effort to put a lot of great resources out on our website at snaptechit.com. We even have a CMMC level 1 readiness gauge that you can go and answer a few questions, and it might help you kind of get a sense of how far you're off on just beginning the process with the first level 1, and the 17 controls related to that. So that might be helpful, if you go to our website and check out our compliance section or the CMMC section, you should be able to find that level 1 readiness gauge as a choice. So.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
And they're on the website, or on the things at snaptechit.com/resources. We've got blogs, we've got infographics, we've got many things posted there as well.
And if folks want to reach out to you individually, are they also welcome to do that?
Oh yeah, you bet. I mean, like right at our website, you can just fill out the form and just ask for a conversation. And we do a lot of just initial call consultations, answer a few questions, and for a lot of folks, that's all they really need. But look, we're looking to engage, we're looking to help, we're looking to grow our business in this area, and I think our approach is very much focused on the small and medium-sized business and their ability to do this in a reasonable way. And so, look, you can call us directly. You can find it at our website, snaptechit.com. You can fill out a form on our website and ask to be engaged. And you could probably get me scheduled for some time to talk with you if you're interested, as well as some other folks on our team that are experts in cybersecurity or just IT in general.
Okay. Well, with that, I think then that's the end of today's webinar and brings us to a conclusion of a great educational session. Today, we were joined by Karl Bickmore, CEO of Snaptech IT. Again, if you have questions about CMMC compliance, about your level of readiness, or where your organization should go, simply go to snaptechit.com /resources. There's some great educational materials there. You can also reach out and schedule a free consultation with the experts at Snaptech IT. And thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Thank you, Karl. Take care.
Thanks, Ted.
All right.